Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the China Manufacturing Decoded podcast. This is episode 198, and the topic is the Boeing 737 MAX door door plug on Alaska Airlines that came out suddenly. And we're going to look at the situation, what actually came out in the news, of course, looking at this in perspective of the other issues of the 737 MAX and of Boeing in general. And we're going to wonder what is design issues, what is manufacturing issues, what is other issues. So this is a very interesting and timely topic. Today, I'm going to be your host. This is Renaud from Sofeast, and I'm together with our head of reliability and compliance, Andrew Amirnovin, who's been on the show quite a few times so far. How are you doing, Andrew?
Great to be here, Renaud. Thank you. How are you?
All right, great. So maybe you can open the show and tell us, okay, what happened? What are the facts? What's going on? Why is this 737 Max in the news again?
Yeah, Renaud, this is still happening and kind of a lot of new information coming in as we watch the scenario situation this happen. But apparently roughly about a week and a half ago, Alaska Airlines flight 1282 going from Portland, Oregon to Ontario had experienced a decompression. A door plug had basically exploded or you might say came off from the airplane and detached basically right about 16,000 feet, which is pretty high. And as a result, they had to do emergency landing, and luckily no one in particular, let's say, was injured. But this has become a big issue because now a lot of the 737 MAX 9s are grounded as a result of this, and NTSB is basically looking at the whole thing and what they need to do.
Right. So NTSB is National Transportation Safety Board, right? So
Yes.
this is the guys who are dispatched to accident sites and near accident sites, and who do the investigations, ask the tough questions, send samples for metallurgical analysis and all these kind of things, and write up the report. And based on based on that, they have a safety board that makes recommendations. And over the years, that industry safety level has gone up and up and up to the point where there's barely any deadly accident in any given year anymore, right? Is amazing. And as they say in that industry, all the rules and procedures and everything, they've been written in blood because a lot of the learnings came from deadly accidents, right? So these are the guys in the US, right? And then there's, depending on the countries, sort of the equivalent here and there of the NTSB. NTSB is the American administration about safety in aviation.
But I have a
N-
comment.
n-
It seems like NTSB is being easy somewhat on Boeing. That being said, you might have thought about it, that the what was that, 2019 737 MAX 8 issue, two
Mhm.
airplanes crashed and 400 people died. You might have thought that, okay, NTSB would have put pressure on them to definitely fix these and do a corrective action on it so that nothing like this ever happens again. And here it is. Max series have had all kinds of problems, and here we see again. So I'm not sure
Mhm.
how good of a job NTSB is doing in terms of catching these issues.
Well, in the US, actually, you should know that better than me because I'm not from the US, right? But the regulator is the FAA, right? The Federal Aviation
Correct.
Administration. And the NTSB is just sort of as a support arm. That's my general understanding.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Um, and the FAA is the regulator, is the ones that give the license to fly to new airplane models and all sorts of things like that. And there is a strong how to say, strong evidence that the FAA has been easy on Boeing over the years in the way that they approved the 737 MAX to start with before the deadly accidents of, I think it was 2019 when two of these planes went into the ground and killed hundreds of people. And that's typical. When you have one big manufacturer in the country, because right now still in airplanes, in that industry, in the US, you have Boeing, and that's about it, right?
That's right.
So in that case, the regulator tends to rely on the manufacturer. And in a lot of countries, it's the same thing with the airline. You have let's say the big national airline, they will write a bunch of procedures and things like that, and then it's given to the regulators who say, okay, well that was good. That becomes the regulation for all the airlines in our country, right? And in Hong Kong, for example, a lot of the regulations in Hong Kong come from procedures written by Cathay Pacific, right? And this is sort of a natural, totally to be expected phenomenon.
Right.
But then it also means that it's very easy to go in the wrong direction and be too lenient, right? And
Correct.
clearly with the 737 MAX, basically we need to recap things a bit because listeners might not be familiar with that. But the context is very important. There was strong economic pressure because American Airlines was about to award a big contract to Airbus for 320 Neo. Okay. And they had this 737, which is a pretty old airplane. And they thought, okay, let's put some more modern engines on that old model. But if you look at the modern jet engines, the diameter is much wider.
Yes.
So they couldn't put it under the wings like they were supposed to be, like they used to be in the old 737. So they had to put these big engines ahead, more toward the nose of the plane. And then, of course, that in a certain situation will tend to force the plane to go out of pitch, to go nose up when you push very hard and things like that.
Right.
Just because you upset the balance of the plane, right? I mean, the engine versus where are the wings and all these kind of things. So
exactly.
then they put that MCAS software system. I'm not going to go into the details, but basically not telling the pilots, but putting this special auto correction when the plane is going to go nose up too much, right? Automatically bring the nose back closer to the horizon,
Right.
to horizontal level. Okay, but then the problem, and that was a major design mistake, is that they only relied on one angle of attack sensor, meaning that if one sensor failed or failed to give the correct data, then the airplane would feel that it's going nose up or nose down way too much, and then it would activate that special software that automatically corrects things and pushes the nose down. And that's what happened. Everything in airplanes, all of these critical systems have redundancy, but in that case, they only used one of the angle of attack sensors. Angle of attack meaning based on how the wind is blowing on the face of the plane, basically,
Yes.
to know if the plane is going like horizontal or going up or going down. So defective sensors plus software that was not, how to say, that did not result in training for the pilots.
Right. And
Pilots
this was
didn't know
the
how to
2000,
react.
and this was the
Right.
2019 issues, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
And that there was clearly, I mean, the regulator should not have allowed that to happen. There's a lack of redundancy on a totally critical system.
Right.
There's an autocorrection system that is not part of training for the pilots, so they assume it's the same from the old 737 to the new 737 MAX, but it's not the same. There's something new that they're not familiar with, and then obviously the pilots. The unions of the pilots were pretty upset and everything. Okay, so that was context of strong economic pressure to go fast, no time to redesign a new plane from scratch, bad design, hiding certain things so that putting a lot of pilots off of work and into training was not necessary. So to cut costs and make the new plane more acceptable, and they even blamed the pilots when there was the first accident, like, oh, this pilot maybe is not so good, it's probably a pilot error. Yeah, good job, guys. So the regulator should, I mean, if they had seen the entirety of it, they would probably have said, no. This is not good design. This is no good, right? So that's a bit of the history behind the 737 Max. I think I mentioned clearly there was economic pressure. So it's good also maybe to go back a few decades to understand. So Boeing in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, I mean, all American citizens were pretty proud of it, right? It had a
Right.
very good image. It was a company where engineers were coming first, and they were committed to doing a good job and pushing the boundaries of the industry and a lot of good things. And then what happened is that you had an ex-GE manager who went to work for McDonnell Douglas, and then later they set up some kind of merger between Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, and that guy coming from GE and used to the Jack Welch methods, who was CEO of McDonnell Douglas, after a few years became CEO of Boeing, and then he
Yes.
started managing Boeing just like, not
McDonnell
just how to
Douglas.
say, in his understanding how Jack Welch was managing GE, right?
Right.
I'm not going to say bad things about Jack Welch because there's also some good things, but that means a lot of focus on making money quarter after quarter, a lot of focus on
Cost cutting.
settings, yeah, cost cutting and stretching performance goals, and do whatever it takes, kind of admonitions to management. So
Right.
what happened? They um, they make some huge mistakes. Like, for example, a symbol of that is that they were kind of tired of the strong engineering culture, always telling them, no, I can't do that. No, this is not the proper way, and so on. And they actually moved headquarters from the Seattle area to the Chicago area, you know,
Yeah, I don't.
um, basically to be in a more, I don't know, the CEO office and the finance folks and everything, let's have our own place, and let's just show these factory guys that are just factory guys, development guys. Yeah, I mean, you guys are just at the factory. You're not the ones making the decisions, right? And
Right.
that's really a symbol of the very bad evolution of that culture, basically, right? This is management and culture issues that have been running deep at Boeing for more than 20 years. And they're just obsessed with looking at the stock markets going up, going down, and how many planes are made. And no, we're not going to slow things down, and so on, right? So a lot of things came up in the news. I mean, every time there's quality reliability issues on some planes, it's not very difficult for the Wall Street Journal or CNBC or some of these news outlets to find disgruntled old employees who tell them all the bad things they have witnessed at Boeing, right? There's been quite a few in the news recently.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I can kind of understand why, because the culture completely shifted from engineering and
Mm,
manufacturing into basically financial management, and
mm,
um, I think I was during the research, I ran into one whistleblower. I believe his name was Mr. Ed Pearson, who was a former Boeing
production
senior.
manager, right?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. And he mentioned that I think he was also a whistleblower. But I think
mm,
one of the things that he mentioned and kind of clicked with me was that there was too much focus on finishing the job than quality.
mm,
And a lot of
mm,
time, most of the time, um, that the work was being done out of the process. What he meant was that, for example, they don't have the right parts. So
Mm.
instead of like stopping the production, they would say, let's just go ahead and continue building. We'll add that part in later. Now,
Oh, terrible. Mm.
that might be okay for some parts, but for some others, it can't because you need to test the product with all the parts
Mm.
in it. You can't
Yeah.
test half the parts, half the product, and then put the other one in and not think that there's going to make any kind of change. And then there
Mm.
was another comment made by someone else that I thought that was really funny, that um, she mentioned that a plane that was designed by clowns and overseen by monkeys. I thought that was kind of a
Oh.
cool.
Mm.
Right, right,
So and that's at Boeing, but it seems like there's also a lot of issues at a one of their key suppliers that makes the fuselage and probably makes these door plugs, like the one that came off in that Alaska Airlines flight. But we're not really exactly sure what they made and what operations they did exactly. But they're probably not very far away from this issue. Is a big company called Spirit Aerosystems, which is a key supplier of Boeing. And a few months ago, there were some quality issues, and they received some news coverage, and people were, investigated a bit about that. And there's an interesting Wall Street Journal article about that came out recently. And one of the things they say is, for example, at that supplier, so Spirit Aerosystems, they incentivized the production people on having fewer defects as reported internally. So what do people do in that case? Oh, we're gonna get a bonus if they see lower defect counts, well, we're going to
correct.
report fewer defects. It's pretty obvious.
Yes,
And obviously that's what happens. So you have this really bad culture, and people don't have, I think what people call it is psychological safety, right? If you start to raise the alarm and to say there's all kinds of things like that, then you are moved aside. You are pushed into early retirement. You move to something else that you don't like, so you leave. All kind
right.
all kinds of measures like that, basically, to shut your mouth, right, and to show the others that if you open up, you'll be punished. So that's really it's really the sign of a pretty bad and pretty corrupt culture, frankly, with very bad management, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of that out there. Probably not the only supplier with these kinds of issues, but if you let it go for too long, oof, um, you're going to have quality issues. And in that industry, um, there's no, I mean, quality issues will kill, maybe 300 people.
Well,
So,
you and I have talked about this before, when you don't put focus on reliability and quality early on, then pay me now
mm,
or pay me later, right? So right now, for example, as a result of this, which actually was very lucky that no one was killed,
mm,
but out of the 218 aircrafts, 171 have been grounded. That's almost all of it. That's amazing. And
mm,
United Airlines have 79 of these. Alaska Airlines owns 65, and then 74 by all others around the world. Not many actually overseas, luckily. But imagine, I mean, if I think United came up and said that they found some loose hardware in some of their
mm,
doors. And that's alarming because these are new airplanes and all of a sudden they have such issues already. If this is not resolved soon enough, I think the financial disaster from this for Boeing is going to be huge.
yeah, I mean, so what they call loose parts and so on. For example, for bolts, it means that it's not at the right torque level. For example, it doesn't mean it's completely loose, but it's
Correct.
not not tight the right way. It's not within specs, right? And
Yes,
if you look at that on planes that have been out for a few months, that is very alarming, very, very
it
alarming.
is very alarming. I
Um,
agree.
so there's also looking at the airline. I mean, this is pure speculation here, but the airline headquarters is also in the Seattle area, just like Boeing. So, and they bought a lot of Boeing 737s. Are they a little bit too in love with Boeing to see what's going on a model of airplane that really doesn't smell very good, and that might come with many other issues that we discover over the years, right? That's really bad. And I looked a bit in the history of Alaska Airlines, and they don't have a pristine, perfect history, right? Safety
Yep.
history. There's that flight 261 in 2000 that went straight down into the Pacific Ocean, not very far away from Los Angeles. And what happened is that maintenance, their maintenance team did not put grease the right way, or especially did not put sufficient grease and not often enough on the jack that actions the trim levels, right? Critical controls to pilot any airplane. And after a while, well, the threads were completely ripped off, and then suddenly it failed, and then the plane just went pitch down, even went on reverse. I mean, just a terrible, terrible thing, right?
Right.
Um, so the conclusions here on a plane that's been in operation for not even 2 months, it's probably not going to be about maintenance, even though let's see, a lot of things could come out of the
Yeah.
investigation by the NTSB.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot remains to be seen what's going to be the actual root cause. And the CEO actually came up and
Mm,
apologized and said, yeah, we made a mistake. But, admitting mistake is one thing, but then applying corrective action so that that sort of thing doesn't happen again in the future is something else. I saw someone made a good comment, and that in order to change this culture, they need to completely go with a leadership or a CEO that comes from engineering background who really
yeah,
understands airplane designs.
yeah. I mean, this guy, the current CEO, he went to make the show at the factory, but the fact is that his office is in Chicago, purposefully, right? Not
Right.
not in Seattle, not by the factories. So to me, it's a bit of a joke.
It is.
So he's been CEO since 2020, and then he was chairman previously, and blah 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 blah. Okay, this guy's been around for a while. What has he done to change the culture? Because all these issues, and by the way, he's an ex-GE also. Okay, he worked at GE for
Yes.
26 years as ISO. So he worked in the culture of the Jack Welch management culture also. So he is not the right guy to fix things. Period. That's it.
I
Like
agree.
end of story. This guy is going to put pressure on on the manufacturing folks and say, hey, guys, how come this happened? And the purchasing folks and the supplier and say, how could you guys mess up like that? But
Right.
but that's it. Are they going to stop looking at the stock market, the price, and are they going to stop putting so much pressure for, pushing planes out as fast as
Right.
possible at the lowest cost? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. This is not the guy who's going to do it.
I totally agree. And I think that, someone who is a CEO with an engineering background would probably go into factory floor, talk to the teams, check out some of the issues, have a feel what's going on in terms of design, development,
Mm,
assembly, production, and then make the right decisions when he's in a team meeting. Right now, I think what kind of value a CEO, which is completely financial,
Mm,
type of information, that's all he knows. He doesn't
mm,
really have any or much information about design, development of a airplane.
right.
What kind of a value he's going to add, even if he was on the shop floor. So, in my opinion,
Mm,
as you said, this has to change completely from the top down.
right. I mean, yeah, this guy studied accounting. I just checked on Wikipedia. And
Wow.
this reminds me, for example, when IBM was doing poorly in the 80s, and then they hired Lou Gerstner, who said, okay, let's try to keep things together. Let's try to keep things simple for now. Let's have a transition plan. Let's get our act together again, be relevant again, little steps. Okay, and then he made sure that his replacement would be an IBMer. I forgot the name, Palomiso or something like that. Someone who
Right.
had been at IBM for decades, right? Who really had the culture. Whereas Lou Gerstner came from where American Express and McKinsey and so on. So he was like a professional manager going there and not really understanding the operations, but just
Right.
looking at the business side and, crisis, you know, making the right moves, but also preparing for the future, um, paying a lot of attention to the culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the best that the CEO, the current CEO, could do. That's my thinking. That's my thinking.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot going on right now, right? So we don't really have all the details of what happened. I heard that FAA is going to audit Boeing. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean that they're actually going to go to
Mm.
factory and run the audit of the production line? What does that mean exactly? That's something that I'm still waiting to
A bit
understand.
of all that. A bit of all
Yeah.
that. They're
Right.
going to try to get down to root causes to really understand the situation and the root causes, and they're going to want to put the finger on, yeah, the one, two, three, four, five things that have contributed to this incident. I'm not sure. Maybe we should call it accident. Um, the serious incident, let's say, uh, near accident. What what contributed to it? And they will write a report. But they also want to contain when you do an 8D or corrective action plan. You need to
Right.
think of containing the bad stuff, right, before shipping. So, okay, we find something bad. Is there anything else that was made the same way or coming from the same source that might have some of the same issue?
Right.
Contain it, don't ship it, stop it, put it somewhere and check it fast. And that's what they're doing now. They're looking at, so they grounded this plane, they grounded these planes. Um, from the inside, they're going to remove the wall panels and they're going to look at the torque levels. Well, they're not going to let the airlines together with Boeing to do that, the maintenance departments and so on. The investigators of the NTSB are going to have a look at it
Right.
firsthand, right? Firsthand, because they don't want, they used to a lot of issues being hidden under the carpet, right? And they're afraid of that, so they will be there physically. They are there physically looking at things, taking measurements. Okay, what's the torque on that bolt? What's the exact position? Is it all the way engaged, or has it started to go up a little bit already?
Right.
What about the pins on the sides? By the way, is it all properly? They might find some other issues. By the way, okay,
Oh,
and they
yes.
might and they might. I think the airline I mean, the maintenance people or the management at the airline must be sweating bullets because number one, it's a big loss for them to have all these planes grounded, but also second, as I mentioned before, to me they are a little bit suspect. I would double check on them carefully because this specific plane, this specific aircraft that had this accident, there were warnings two or three times in in previous flights, very recently. We're talking just within the days before the accident. There were warnings, automated warnings of loss of pressure. And loss of pressure is known to be a how to say a leading indicator to this kind of problem. It's possible that one of these plugged doors has started to move already. And if it started to move and get out of alignment and doesn't fit nicely with the frame anymore, well, uh, you know, then maybe a few more vibrations and it might pop out entirely. So
I
what do they
agree. And
do?
how old are these
Mm,
airplanes?
yeah, like this one specifically had been in operation for less than 2 months, I think.
Oh my God.
Right. So have they summoned some guys from Boeing to come and check it out? Have they, what have they done? Right. Eh, from what I read, they um, they rerouted the plane, so it was always operating over land, and it was easy to land in case of an emergency, rather than going over the water. Okay, that makes sense, but that means you have a you have some kind of indicator that you have a problem, like you have smoke, right? Basically, you have indicator. Okay, something here is not right, and then instead of saying, okay, put it aside, stop using it, dismantle it, go for the usual suspects, number one, number two, number three, number five, and find a problem. And until we fix the problem, don't put it back in service. Well, of course, this would be upsetting. Maybe their schedule. This might lead into issues. However, I guess they have a few extra airplanes. I mean, don't tell me that 100% of their pilots are able to work 100% of the time. They've got to have a bit of extra capacity in pilots and in aircraft, right? So could they just put it aside? Why couldn't they put it aside? This is a relatively large airline. This is not a tiny airline, right? So uh, I think they're gonna have to answer some tough questions.
For sure.
I mean, because this is sort of a miracle that nobody got killed, but it's also a miracle that nobody was sitting next to that portion of the war that basically popped out, right? And looking at the photos after the flight, some of the foam on the cushions of the seats had been ripped off. I mean, if there had been somebody sitting there, just imagine. And a
You
lot of
know,
things have
You,
been
you know, it's
yeah.
very interesting. You just made me remember one of the passengers took a selfie with one of the guys who
Mm.
was sitting on the last seat, and apparently the pressure was so enormous that ripped off his shirt completely off of
Oh yeah,
his.
right, right. And they found a lot of phones, and they found some iPhones uh, that fell 16,000 feet and were still okay.
That is
Probably fell into
amazing.
the grass and something soft, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But wow.
Yeah, that was
So
amazing to me actually. Because iPhone
mm,
typically, you drop it from less than half a meter and cracks, and I was surprised
right,
at that for sure.
yeah, right, right. Well, depends how it falls and what the surface is, I guess.
Exactly.
Um, so I mean, in terms of takeaways, first thing I would say is let's wait for the conclusion of the investigation. But we're going to hear a lot about it because for sure more stuff is going to come out. More details are going to come out that make either the manufacturer or the fuselage manufacturer maybe or the airline or some other body look bad, right? So I would expect that, but let's wait for the conclusions to see what contributed to this accident. And really, again, it's all about collecting the facts. So that's what they're doing, containing the potentially defective products. Don't let people ride in these airplanes until you are relatively sure that they are okay. And, do a proper root cause analysis. There might be 2, 3, 4, 5 things that allowed that to happen. And then we'll see what the NTSB suggests as a way to prevent this into the future, right? Any thoughts on that, or?
I think there's nothing really we can do until we actually find out what the root cause is. But any ideas? I guess some ideas of what I think went wrong. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that definitely manufacturing quality, because it seems like the design was good. I understand, as I understand, the door had to be lifted up and placed in some kind of a position where it would fall into a place and it would lock in. And then in a normal situation, if there's no huge vibrations, even if you don't have the bolts, it might be, moving a little bit, but it wouldn't come out. And then the bolts will be the fail-safe, meaning that once you put those 4 bolts in place, then that door is not going anywhere. But in this case, looks like the bolts were missing or something. They haven't found the bolts. And then the door somehow, I'm assuming probably hard vibrations, moved the door up and out of the sockets. And as a result, under certain decompression, boom, the door just unplugged. And I can think of only manufacturing quality issue in this case, because it looks like design was solid if it was done right. And then, why manufacturing quality issue? That's exactly to be decided. That's the root cause.
Well, maybe it's manufacturing process design issues.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe.
Right. Could
how
be
come they could? Yes. Right. Did they actually set up the processes right to have proper process control? And did they actually inspect that? Or did they just kick the products out of the factory and let it fly, right? So
right.
we'll probably never know exactly what happened to this one, but there seem to be some systemic issues. And again, let's wait for the report from the NTSB. All right. Well, that was an interesting one. And again, when something like this comes out in the news, we'll try to comment on them based on general information that has come out in the press. And we hope it's interesting to our listeners. Next week, we'll be back. Actually, it's me together with Paul Adams talking about experience effects, basically how a factory gets more efficient as it makes more of the same product over time. So that's an interesting topic. Thanks a lot, Andrew, and thanks to the listeners. And you will hear from us next week as usual.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.